Welcome back to CBS Sports HQ. The NFL draft is upon us. And of course, Jeremy, we're going to be talking about mock drafts, top prospects, the whole nine until April. And right now on CBSSports.com, we have standouts from the Senior Bowl, a full article you can look at right now. Top of that list, D tackle from FSU, Brandon Fisk, Amani Bailey, Shaw Smith-Wade are on there. And April 25th through the 27th out of Detroit, Michigan. That is the draft. And we're going to talk about under the radar draft prospects right now on CBS Sports HQ. And for that, we have our senior draft expert, Ryan Wilson, and NFL on CBS's Charles Davis. Two guys who were at the Senior Bowl and saw some of these guys firsthand to discuss. And we're going to start with Xavier Worthy out of Texas, someone who led the Big 12 in receiving yards. Ryan, what makes him so special?
First off, Jacqueline, I'm sad you had to read a list with a Florida State prospect on it and no UF people there. We're not talking about Anthony Richardson this year, which was a consistent talking point last year. We've moved on to Xavier Worthy, and Charles probably agrees with me. He's not necessarily an under-the-radar prospect, but the amount of time we spent talking about quarterbacks over the last few months, it feels like he's gotten lost a little bit. I think he's going to change that next week in Indianapolis. The size is going to be the issue with him. How much does he weigh? He's plenty tall, 6 feet 6'1". He plays much bigger than his size. He breaks arm tackles like he's a running back at times. He can win downfield consistently. He's not going to be a contested catch guy because that's not his game in terms of the way he's built. But he reminds me a little bit of Deshaun Jackson in that he consistently wins down the field. He does struggle with focus drops at times, but he plays with an edge. If there's a mistake made by the quarterback, he's going to run down the mistake and make the tackle if it's an interception or a lost fumble. And you like that type of edge from a player who's known that play a position that's typically known as divas, but he does so many things well, and I think he's going to change the script in terms of the top wide receivers we've been talking about in recent weeks and months, because he's a special talent when he's locked in. And oh, by the way, as you see here, does offer some punt return ability, and he's a plus punt returner, not just a guy back there making fair catches.
You know, Ryan, it's going to be really difficult. We would bring up, and by we, I mean Anthony Richardson, every single NFL draft conversation. So we're going to have to find some new names to tap into. Keeping it in the wide receiver category, Charles, we're talking about a wide receiver out of Western Kentucky, Malachi Corley. What catches your eye about him?
Well, Jacqueline, if I'd known we should have been talking about a Florida player, I would have said Ricky Pearsall, the wide receiver from Florida, who would be an under-the-radar prospect that Ryan has analyzed so well and knows so well, and he's a guy who makes tremendous contested catches and big-time catches, and probably had the catch of the year in college football last year. But you know about Malachi Corley, who, as Ryan talked about with Xavier Worthy, maybe not under the radar, but more people should know about him. His nickname is Yak King. So if you go to all of his social media, you'll see that, because most of the time he catches the ball within 6-7 yards of the line of scrimmage and turns it into something big. And that's the big thing about him. Look, the easy comparison, is it a lazy comparison? But it's probably the relevant comparison is Deebo Samuel. Built similarly, tough, muscled up, rock guys who can catch the ball, who can turn it into jet sweeps, catch it short, turn it long. This is a kid that bears watching, had a big Senior Bowl week. If you have offensive creativity on your side, Malachi Corley's the guy for you.
Ooh, yeah, Deebo Samuel comp. That is no joke there. Also, I like the Ricky Pearsall discussion. We'll have to tell producer Jack to keep that one going. Charles, let's talk about a running back from Washington. Braylon Allen, what are your comps for him?
Yeah, another big, strong, physical guy, Ryan, out of the University of Wisconsin that we never see coming, right, in terms of a running back. I mean, listen, Jonathan Taylor, prior to getting a scholarship at Wisconsin, was a strong physical runner in high school, but didn't get his scholarship until he showed he could break away and make the longer runs. I don't think Braylon Allen is as a long speed guy like Jonathan Taylor, but he will beat you up at the line of scrimmage and into the second and third levels and turn those big, turn smaller runs into bigger ones as the game goes on because people fall off of him. Similar to Jonathan Taylor, a ball security issue that has to be addressed and taken care of. I think that will be on the next level. But listen, there are plenty of teams in this league, right, Ryan, that still talk about running the football. Ravens, Colts with Taylor, Seahawks. I know Pete Carroll's not there, but I think the team still remains the same. And I think the Chargers with Jim Harbaugh are going to want to run the football a little bit more. He's the type of back that you need. Big, thumping guy who can make those plays for you both inside and then turn them into longer runs as the game goes on.
And guys, when we talk about the NFL draft, it's like Bama players being drafted, Bama players as draft prospects. There's always a number of them, so that brings us to Chris Bradwell, the edge out of Bama. And when he was asked at the Senior Bowl what he brings to the game, Ryan, he said quickness, power, the ability to get to the quarterback. Do you agree with that? What else does he bring to the game, Ryan?
Yeah, no, he's pretty good at writing his own scouting report. He makes my job a lot easier, but he's exactly right. And what happens when you watch Alabama, and you just talked about Jacqueline, there's so many players to choose from. It starts with Dallas Turner when you watch them play, number 15. But we talked to Will Anderson Jr. back in the fall for the podcast, and he said, look, man, don't forget about Christian Bradwell on the other side. I will ride with him all day long. And Christian Bradwell proved that not only at the Senior Bowl, where Charles got to see him every day at practice, but during the season, I don't want to say you fly under the radar at Alabama, but your eyes go to number 15, and then when they refocus on number 41, he is always in the backfield doing things like this. He might have the best bull rush in college football, and that's not something you talk a lot about unless you're deep in the weeds in the draft. But consistently it shows up. You're not going to block him with a tight end. I don't even know why these teams halfway through the season continue to do that. He will win in terms of scraping down the line and making plays in the run game from the backside. He's a hustle player through and through. He's a great person through and through. And I will not be surprised, Jacqueline and Charles, if he ends up going earlier than folks think. And I think second round feels like a layup at this point, and I think he's going to make himself some money, as we like to say, once we get through Indianapolis next week.
Ryan, let's keep it in the SEC. We're going to talk about a corner from Mizzou, Ennis Rakestraw, allowing a big fat goose egg in touchdowns and over 1,000 career coverage snaps. Ryan, what are your comps for him? What comes to mind?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I will tell you in terms of the physicality and the size, the immediate person that came to mind when I watched him play was Devin Witherspoon. Now, he's not going to be a top 10 pick, but the edge with which he plays, and he plays the cornerback position like he's Lawrence Taylor tackling running backs and quarterbacks in the backfield. He does not care. He is going to fly downfield. You see the 6 feet, 188. I want to see what that number actually is next week, but he plays much bigger than that. I also want to see how fast he runs because he will lock you up in man-to-man coverage. I want to see what the deep speed looks like on those vertical routes, but he is not afraid of anything, and as you noted, Jacqueline, he does not allow big plays. He makes big plays, and he's a tone setter, which is not something you often say about someone playing in the secondary that's not a safety. But he plays outside. He can play inside. His future may even be inside more frequently in the NFL. But there's very little not to like about his game, especially if he's able to add some weight. Of course, we said that last year about Devin Witherspoon. Devin Witherspoon weighs plenty. Weighs enough. He knows exactly what he needs to weigh based on the way he played not only at Illinois, but the way he broke out last year for the Seahawks.
All right, finally, Charles, Graham Barton, someone from Duke who can play anywhere on the line, whether it's left tackle. He played center his freshman season, I believe. What is the team going to get from him?
A starting center. And right away, because that's where he belongs. And I'm glad you brought up that he had played center previously before moving to left tackle, which is the glamour position on the offensive line, as we all know. I mean, heck, we turned it into a movie and books and the whole deal about playing left tackle and what it means in the NFL. But the way the game is going, having that pivot is a really big deal. Think of what Tyler Linderbaum did with the Baltimore Ravens offensive line. Creed Humphrey has done for the Kansas City Chiefs offensive line. Having that person in the middle who can handle everything, the line calls, be able to block the nose tackles at the point of attack, slide up, get to the second level and get the linebackers, get out, snap the ball, pull, lead on sweeps, all of those things, you'll get that from Graham Barton. Plus, he's going to battle you like mad. And I just think that he projects inside, so it's a little bit of a projection. I don't think it's much of one. I don't think I'm giving an original thought, am I, Ryan? That when we talk about Graham Barton, instead of left tackle, he goes to center right away. And we have a few guys who are going to make that move. I think about Cody Whitehair coming out of Kansas State, who was a left tackle and a very good one on the college level and became a center guard in the NFL. This is the kind of projection I'm making with Graham Barton, and I think someone would be very happy to grab him and be able to plug him into their lineup.
Charles, I see the basketball goal behind you. This feels like a layup because sometimes when you try to project tackles to guard or even further inside the center, it's hard to see it. This feels incredibly easy. And it's not like Graham Barton didn't hold his own at left tackle at Duke against a pretty stiff competition. He has really good feet. It just feels like he'd be a more natural interior player and a day one starter, to your point. I know Steelers fans have talked a lot about Graham Barton in recent months, going back to the middle of the season when they've seen some lack of interior line play there. And their teams are going to love to get a guy like Graham Barton Barton, a guy like Jackson Powers-Johnson, who had a big week at the Senior Bowl from Oregon. And these are guys, and they deserve their due, Charles. These are guys we're going to talk a lot more about as we get through next week as well, when they have a chance to shine. And perhaps one of these guys, I wouldn't be surprised if Graham Barton busts out a sub-5 40 when he does the 40-yard dash.
Yeah, both of them are guys that projected elsewhere and have turned themselves into centers, and that's where they're going to be. Remember, Jackson Powers-Johnson was a defensive tackle before he moved over and started playing offensive line. So we see this all the time, the projection, and by the way, those projections are both going to make those guys a lot of money.
Charles Davis, Ryan Wilson joining us here on HQ as we were talking about under-the-radar draft prospects. Of course, we'll be continuing that conversation as the draft approaches in April. And, of course, you can hear Ryan Wilson on the With the First Pick podcast. In the very latest episode, Ryan and Rick Spielman going down their mock draft 8.0. You can download and listen wherever you find your pods or scan that QR code.